Hi everyone, it's Steve Wyss here. I'm joined by Jonathan Fadugba, and this is the Nordic Football Podcast. Our second episode this week after a fantastic interview on which was released on Monday. Sean Constable, the Östersund's ex-assistant manager. Absolutely, really a great insight into the club, into Scandinavia as a whole, and I just want to say great reaction we've had from that podcast, a great interview, John. I must say, you seem like you really enjoyed that one with Sean.
Yeah, hi everyone. Hi to you, Steve. Back for another episode this week, so 2 in a week. But yeah, I had a really good chat with Sean over the weekend. I had a great conversation with him about Sweden, about life in Norway and Sweden as a coach, the differences between the two nations, and managing in general, and also his time at Östersund, where he's recently left the club. And yeah, if you haven't listened to it, obviously go back. We had a really great reaction, like you say, and it's good to be back to business now, isn't it? The season in Sweden returns after the summer break, so we're back for more.
Yeah, it's been a really sporadic period in both leagues, really. Sweden's had a complete break. Norway's been very stop-start with a few weeks off. There's been cup rounds mixed in to make things more complicated. A bit more regularity now as the summer comes around. Europa League qualifiers, Champions League qualifiers, more on that later. But the Swedish league is back, and there was a match on Tuesday night, a big one as well. AIK against Norrköping, 2-0 win for the visitors there, John. I asked you today, actually. I was wondering why that game was played isolated on its own. It's to do with the scheduling of the European qualifiers, isn't it? But a significant result, really, that one, wasn't it?
Yes, a really good game to come back to a mouth-watering fixture. A massive game, really, for Norrköping, because I believe that if they hadn't done well in that game, then they'd be totally out of the title race, and any chance of winning the league, I think, would have been completely over. They're still, 9 points behind Malmö, so this isn't sort of like they're not really back in it by any stretch of the imagination necessarily. But I think 12-point gap, it would have been game over for them. Big win away from home as well at the champions, who had a bit of a wobble of late. They're now 6 points behind Malmö in third, and behind Djurgården as well, who have a game in hand. They're big rivals. So yeah, a bit of a blow for ÖIK, but it was a fantastic performance and result from Norrköping in the end, I think, in terms of their professionalism, the way they managed the game. Obviously, they had a bit of luck with the red card to Dimitriadis, but all in all, I thought Norrköping were good value.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it, that looks like a very good result for Malmö, actually, because Norrköping are quite a fair bit adrift. But it looked like AIK was going to be the side to challenge Malmö there, but they're 6 points clear of AIK. I looked at the goals and I was shocked to see them headed against them from set pieces. I mean, isn't the strength of AIK meant to be defensively, stuff like that? I mean, that was really surprising how they caught them out from set pieces. Was that just a fluke, or was it a Pacific Norrköping threat, do you think?
Yeah, it's a good point. AIK have traditionally been very, very defensively aware and alert in their title race last season, in their run to winning the league. But this year, it's not been the case whatsoever. And for people who like fantasy football, they'll be pretty disappointed, I think, because I know I've got a couple of ÖIK players in my team in the defence, and they just haven't kept clean sheets. I think they've kept 1-2 clean sheets in their last 6 games. So that tells you quite a lot about how they're doing. And yeah, not fantastic, to be honest. 2 set pieces, 2 goals, both of them by Christopher Niemann. And yeah, it's just a very, very important win. That they rode the game out, and I was impressed by their sort of tactical setup.
Yeah, so the 2 goals were from set pieces, but in terms of the general flow of the game, I mean, I saw some interesting tweets that you were springing out of how Norrköping are very interesting side tactically. You want to go into a little bit of detail about that and what impressed you most about them in that capacity?
Yeah, well, it's something we touched on the podcast with Sean Constable, and I asked him to name his favourite teams and players to watch this season so far. And one of the teams he called out for particular praise was Norrköping. And obviously they're my preseason tip for the title, but it's gone quite, they haven't quite picked up that form and consistency to really challenge for the league. But in terms of their tactical approach, and I think the way they play football, I do think they're an admirable team to watch. And I think Sean made a very good point, which I also believe. The way they utilise their midfielders, they sort of use midfielders as wingers, sometimes as wing backs in a 3-4-3 system. Sometimes as centre backs, the likes of Dagestal, who I've seen play centre midfield many times in person. So they just have a really fluid shape about them. Tactically, they're very intelligent, and I thought they managed the game extremely well with the red card. Although they were under some pressure early on from AIK, they managed to ride that out and just pick up the win. I think they are an interesting side to watch and one of the better teams to watch. Their manager, Jens Gustafsson, is very highly rated as a coach. And if you look at their form from last season, that was why I thought they would pick it up. There's a couple of rumours now that their manager, a couple of players may leave. Simon Tern, a really, really key player there, may be off. And Jordan Larsson as well, who's doing very, very well this season in the league, scoring goals after goals. He's one of the top scorers in the league with 8 league goals. Rumours he may be off as well. So a couple of their best players are raising eyebrows, but all in all, Norrköping, it was a very, very important win. And maybe their European hunt, if not title race hunt, is back up and running.
Yeah, so let's have a look at a general state of play in this league. As it resumes this weekend, everyone's playing. Malmö are top on 30 points. Djurgården 24 points, although they've got a game in hand. AIK on 24. Then you've got a bunch of teams on 21. Both of the Gothenburg outfits and Norrköping have joined them there. Down at the bottom, it's not looking good for AFC Eskilstuna or Falkenberg or Helsingborg are in the bottom 3 right now as well. State of play was an absolutely huge game coming up at the weekend on the Sunday. AIK Malmö. Is that now in the must-win territory for AIK, do you think?
Well, I wouldn't say must-win because it's still, early days. We're not even halfway through the league yet. 13 games played. We've still got a lot of rope left to pull in this tug of war. But I think the way Malmö are doing, in particular, 1 loss this season, the fewest goals conceded in the league, the most goals scored in the league, they look very ominous, to be honest. I think they're going to take a lot of stopping now, the way they're going. They just signed a player as well, Jonas Knudsen from Ipswich Town, who's a very, very solid signing, a Danish international. He can play left back, he can play sort of in a left-sided, maybe centre-back role if they go for a 3-man back line, for example. He'll add a lot of versatility and quality really to their back line. Played, I think, over 150 games roughly for Ipswich. So really, they're looking very, very strong at the moment. I think, if AIK were to lose that, it's looking, they've already opened up a 6-point gap. Obviously, you're going to have a game in hand, so that could be 3 points. But the way Malmö are playing under Uwe Rosler, you do worry for the rest of the league, really, for the big boys.
Yes, definitely. Malmö looking very strong at the top of this league right now, and the result of the weekend will be interesting. There's been quite a few weeks off the league in Sweden. There's been some transfers though to talk about, John. Some big ones as well that need to be mentioned on here. Maybe you want to just tell the listeners about the crucial ones in relating to the Allsvenskan.
Yeah, well, there's been a few moves, like we said there. Jonas Knudsen is, I think, a big signing for Malmö. Just shores up that defence even more. Then there's the one we talked about on the 2 pods ago, which is obviously Benjamin Nygren has officially been signed by Genk in Belgium. So the champions of Belgium there have snapped him up. Big signing. And I did have a bit of a rant about that and sort of wasn't overly thrilled, but you have to get used to it, and we'll see what happens. And I think one of the other big moves of the window really is Linus Hellenius, who's gone to Cyprus. He's left the league. He's been a solid goal scorer over a number of years now. particularly the last 2 seasons where he's really been good. Second top scorer in the country last season, and he's departed. So big blow for GIF Sundsvall, really, especially when they're hovering above relegation just about, with financial problems that are quite well documented. They had to sell him, really, and I think they're in a bit of a pickle, actually. If you look towards as the season goes on, they may struggle to sort of match the wonderful season they had last year, especially with the loss of their captain. Yeah,
it looks like they're in a bit of a mess, actually, Sundsvall. They're above the relegation zone right now, but only on goal difference. Helsingborg are on the same amount of points, and there's been a big change there. A new manager has come into the fold for Helsingborg, and it's a bit of a legend in many ways. But I understand the opinion of him at the club is indifferent.
Yeah, very big move, and it's the return of Henrik Larsson to the Swedish league, the Allsvenskan, and a return to his former club. He's back to Helsingborg, which, well, if I tell you that the last time I saw Henrik Larsson at Helsingborg, he was being basically chased out of the club by angry ultras after they were relegated in 2016. That doesn't really tell half the story. A lot of fans were not happy at all with him replacing their manager who departed. He was, I think, fired, and he's left the club. So yeah, a lot of fans aren't really too happy about that. Henrik Larsson says it's water under a bridge, and he's happy to be back. But really, there's a little bit of unrest at that appointment. So we'll see how things transpire. But yeah, it's a return to Sweden for him, and obviously he's a massive name in Sweden, a legend, really. And it will drum up some more interest, won't it?
Yeah, I mean, what's gone wrong at Helsingborg? Because pre-season, pretty much everywhere you looked, everyone's saying no problem, they're not going to be involved in any relegation battle. They're going to be mid-table comfortably, and might even be a dark horse to challenge the top 6 or 7. But they've been really poor, haven't they? What's gone wrong there exactly?
Well, I think maybe they were a little bit much was expected of them. Even myself, I thought they would do quite well, but they haven't really done as well as maybe was thought. Don't forget they've only come up, so we've talked in the past about there's a little bit of the teams that get promoted from Superettan teams. There tends to be a gap opening up at the moment. Teams that come up struggle. In fact, all the 3 teams are the bottom 3 who have been promoted. So that tells you everything, really. And I think that it's almost in the exact order that they were promoted. So yeah, I think that is part of it. I think expectations were a little bit high. Maybe some of the bigger names like Grankvist, we've taken them, overvalued them maybe slightly. But they're only 3 points behind Kalmar in 11th, so and 4 points behind Ostersund's in 10th. So it's not as if it's not the end of the world. But I think one of the other elements to it is I haven't seen much from some of their signings. The likes of Odd and Bodø, who came from Gillingham, a young player, and Kunyai Bendu, who's formerly been at Celtic, amongst many clubs. We haven't seen much of them really in the first 12, 13 games, and I think maybe the recruitment, that hints at sort of maybe the recruitment issues and not really integrating them into the squad. So Per Ole Ljung, was left his job, and they've made a change. So we'll see how things go. I still think they'll be okay in terms of surviving. I think they've got enough to not go down. I'd be surprised. But Henrik Larsson has experience in relegation with Helsingborg, so he will not want to repeat that, I'm sure.
Are Kalmar ever not 11th at any stage of the season? It just feels like they live in 11th place, no matter what the hell's going on. But and it's the same old story every time with them, isn't it? With the style and the goals. But I mean, you've got to be concerned, really concerned about AFC, Eskilstuna, and Falkenberg right now, haven't you? They've only scored 9 goals each. Even Kalmar have scored more than that. And already it's early. It looks like they could be potentially getting set adrift. Do you give them any hope?
Well, it's funny because we did a poll recently asking what team do you support in the league on Twitter. We had a lot of Kalmar fans, didn't we? It turned out.
I know they must be very popular, Kalmar.
Yeah. So we might have to start talking about them a little bit more, giving them a bit more airtime on this show. But I think, to be honest, Falkenberg, Eskilstuna, they are struggling. They've got one win each. Falkenberg's underlying sort of XG statistics, their expected goals and that kind of thing has looked quite good. As we discussed in the show with Sean Constable, at one point they were better than Östersunds, and maybe you might have expected things to swing in their favour at some point, maybe, but at the moment it hasn't really happened. They're not scoring enough goals. They're conceding a lot, 23. AFC Eskilstuna have conceded 21 for Falkenberg. So yeah, both teams are struggling. I think Kalmar, like you say, they're kind of the trying to think the equivalent in England. To be honest, I would have said West Brom, but maybe not.
Yeah,
who's their equivalent? Maybe what? Newcastle. Just a team mid-table-ish.
Which team are we on about here? Kalmar.
Kalmar, yeah.
Well, I can't believe Kalmar will be like Newcastle United. I mean, Newcastle are huge, aren't they? Really.
Kalmar won the title more recently than Newcastle, that's for sure. But you could be right there. You could be right. But yeah, they're a team that sort of tends to get the job done. They know what they're doing, and they hover around mid-table. They've only won 2 games this season. They just managed to pick off draws, and 7 draws out of 12. They don't lose too many games. They've just got that knack. So yeah, Kalmar fans, if you've got a theory as to why you're always so solid, please let us know.
Well, the last time Newcastle United won a trophy, Queen Victoria was on the throne, wasn't she? I don't know, it was a long time ago, probably a bit sooner than that. But Kalmar, yeah, very interesting. It was a very good poll, actually, that. We had a lot of responses, and I was interested to see how many. I was surprised. Kalmar were one of the surprises for me, but obviously there's room for scope to talk about them a lot more. Yes, I mean, you say at the bottom there, it looks like Helsingborg might have a new lease of life there. Sundsvall, you mentioned they are in a big financial trouble, John. Is that going to be potentially points drop then, or?
Well, yeah, I think they are struggling. They've admitted, they admitted they need to sell players. I think one of the other Spanish players had his contract terminated recently, David Harrow, who wasn't really a massive part of the squad, to be honest, but maybe they wanted to get rid of him for financial reasons. Yeah, if you look at it, Hellenius is a massive part of their game. They've got a few other players, maybe Sema and, a few others, Batanera, but, Batanera, I'm sure he was rumoured to have been the subject of a big bid from AIK before the season started, and, he's worth a few quid. So I can imagine there'll be some interest in him. I think there's worrying signs for their fans, to be honest. I think they're going to struggle without a goal scorer in Hellenius.
Sundsvall are playing against AFC Eskilstuna this weekend. That looks like a 6-pointer already. Sundsvall actually odds on with the bookmakers. Would you be backing them at an odds on price?
Well, AFC Eskilstuna are in such bad form. It's hard to say that I would back Eskilstuna, to be fair. Since they beat IFK Gothenburg on the first day of the season, they haven't won a single game. And they've just drawn 3. Malmö battered them 5-0. Norrköping beat them 2-0 away in their last match. So, yeah, you'd worry about them. And if you look at Eskilstuna's upcoming fixtures, after GIF Sundsvall, they've got Djurgården at home, Kalmar at home, IFK away, Hammarby away, Hammarby at home, Östersunds away, AIK at home, which is how many points do you see them getting there? Really, they're going to have to really significantly up their game or get some transfers in. Yeah. Or they're in. They look like toast.
Yeah, it's a huge game for them. That's for sure. So you must be excited about the league resuming on a full-time basis now, John. Is there any team or two that you're really looking to hope really move and progress forward in the second half of the season to keep your eye on?
I'll say that again, sorry.
Is there a team, for the second half of the season that potentially could want to keep an eye on that could rise up the league from sort of mid-table?
Well, we'll see. I think, one of the interesting things to look out for at the moment, both for fantasy players and the league in general, is Hammarby. I think they have a big situation in terms of their striker on loan, Vidar Kjart Hansen. He's got 3 games left before his loan expires. And, they're seventh at the moment, but they've been pretty decent to watch. And I think, his departure, can they overcome that? Will that be a big blow? Can they get him back? Maybe. I think that's a big question mark over them. Odd and Bodø, I think there's a lot of talk at the moment about Carlos Strandberg maybe leaving. Malmo looking to sell him. There's been rumours a Turkish club is making a bid, and if they were to lose him, I think that's a big worry. He's been responsible for quite a lot of their goals this season and their all-round play. So I think there's various players that maybe, their departure can have a significant impact on the team. We had one question actually from a listener about, how much will EFK miss Benjamin Nygren, for example. That's another one. How will they cope with his loss? Gibsonsville, Hellenius, how will they cope with that? The only team that really seems to be significantly adding is Malmo, adding a bit of strength there. A couple of others looking to do business, but yeah, that's, that tells you a bit about the league in general. Sometimes look at Norrköping, if they lose Simon Tern and Jordan Larsson, they're absolutely screwed, aren't they? That's their best top goal scorer and probably their best player. That would just ruin them for the season, in my opinion. So, there's going to be a lot of key transfers coming up in the next few weeks, and I think that will determine a lot about where this league goes.
Yeah, and we talked about Allsvenskan Fantasy there. If anyone who plays that, you can join our league with the join code 21230/4097. Unfortunately, I missed the deadline before Tuesday. I got completely mixed up with all the time, so I don't even know what my team is. This week I've been fighting against the bottom 5 places all year. Although you actually joined me down there, didn't you? Before the
my wildcard now. I played my wildcard, but I think I got Jordan Larsson. They didn't score, so
I've got about. I mean, you mentioned the AIK defenders. I've had a few of those in my team as well this year that have not been too great for me. But I mean, I have to look at the transfers because there's all sorts going on. Cartensen is someone I've been relying on a lot this year. So let's see how the fantasy goes. But yeah, please join with the fantasy league. And I suppose we better move on now to talk a bit about Norway, John, because that league has been it's not had a complete break. It did have a few weeks off because of the international period. But we've had Eliteserien rounds, a couple of full rounds recently, and the cup has been absolutely ridiculously wild. All sorts of results, left, right, and centre there.
Yeah, well, as we watch this as well, I've just turned on the TV, and England have beaten Norway's women as well, so they're out of the World Cup, the Women's World Cup. So disappointing maybe result there for Norway at the hands of Phil Neville and his girls. But yeah, we've got some questions from the listeners, and I'm going to start you off with one of them, I think, to kick off this section, Norwegian section. So, Steve, tell me something about Tromsø. We have a question from Simon Thomas, who is a student of French, Italian, Norwegian, Danish, and Swedish. So good to hear from you, Simon Thomas. Thanks for your question. With the Rosenborg win, are Tromsø out of trouble now, or are they still in trouble?
Salut, Thomas. You know what? I'm really pleased for Tromsø. I really am pleased for Simo Valakaitis. He's won 3 games in a row in the league, 2 of them against Rosenborg and Molde at home. And they've actually done something that I didn't think they were capable of doing. They've won games a bit in an ugly way, if you know what I mean. I'm sure all of those wins they've had, if you look at expected goals for those games, they will not have come out on top in the statistics at all. In fact, they would have, in a couple of them, they've been dominated against. But they've hung in there. They've grafted hard. Some defenders need some praise. Antonsen is normally midfield, has gone to the back line and played really well. Simon Wangberg, it's no surprise his resumption into the starting 11 after injury has resulted in 2 clean sheets. They put a lot of bodies on the line, some great blocks in there. And they've kind of gone away from their I'm not saying they ever were fancy football under Valakari, but they've gone away from the sort of the passing possession game a bit more. And they've been willing to adapt. And, I think you've got to give him a lot of credit. I always said there's no way would they go down under Simo Valakari. He's too good a manager. And he's proved it in the last few weeks. Are they reliable again? That's a different question entirely, because it's not like the wins haven't been that convincing. There's been an element of luck about them, and they've got a lot of injuries still. So I don't think they can be relied upon necessarily, but it's good to see that there's more than one string to their bow,
Yeah, and I think, one of the interesting things with Tromsø, I notice is they seem to be a sort of team that either wins or loses, aren't they? They don't seem to draw many games at all. One draw all season. Won 4 and lost 7. So they seem to be a team that is committed to getting a result one way or another, don't they? I mean, I've got an interesting question here from Adam Mack, which I found quite a good one, to be honest, at Mac Attack FPL. Adam, thanks for your question. And he asks, it seems like anybody can beat anybody in the Eliteserien, and predicting results is near impossible. Is this normal for the league or a feature of the season? And as someone who, professionally tips the league, predicting results is kind of your bag, isn't it, Steve? So what's your thoughts on that question from Adam Mack?
I think the answer is, yeah, it's fairly normal. There's periods when this league is going on and I can't pick my nose, I can't predict anything. And there's other periods where I'm flying and it's very easy to predict. At this moment in time, I feel there's a lot of variation going on. There's been quite a few surprising teams this year. So yeah, probably anyone can beat anyone, really. Look at Molde. They've lost away against Tromsø and Kristiansund. It's results are a bit wild right now. Tread very carefully. And nothing surprises me at the moment in the Eliteserien. There's no real consistency from anyone.
And there's another question following on from that, which I'll just delve straight into, and I can answer later maybe as well, which is from This Is Liam, or Liam. I always wonder about that. So if you do listen to this podcast, Mr. This Is Liam, please let me know. He asks, and thanks for your question, he asks, do you stand with your same end-of-season predictions for the second half of the season? And obviously you've got Molde to win the league. I can't quite recall who you had to go down, but Molde are top by 3 points now, but Odd have got 2 games in hand. And Bodø Glimt are only, 5 points behind with 2 games in hand as well. So are you still, happy with your call for Molde?
Yeah, in terms of Molde, I'm pretty confident they're going to win the league. I think it's not the greatest year in terms of quality in the Eliteserien. So the big teams like Rosenborg and Brann, Vålerenga, they're just not doing enough right now. So, I think Molde can win the league, but there's a chance for Odd and there's a chance for Bodø Glimt to do not necessarily a Leicester City, but you know what I mean. There's a chance for one of them to spring a real surprise and win the league if they can keep it up. So whether they can, I don't think either of them can, to be honest. But they've set themselves up well. So stranger things have happened, haven't they, in life? So Molde have got to be careful. They've dropped a couple of stupid defeats when they shouldn't have done. But they're so great at home that they'll probably win. I mean, how many home games do you have in the league now? 15 home games. They'll probably win about 12 or 13 home games, and that is probably enough to see them over the line. But in terms of my other predictions, I predicted Sarpsborg in third. They're not doing so well right now, but I do think they can rebound and climb up the league in the second half of the season. And at the bottom of the table, Ranheim yet again seem to defy me, don't they? Who knows with them? I can't. I really cannot. There's no logic behind Ranheim sometimes, John. But yeah, I think Mjøndalen have given it a good fight, but they're probably going to go down. By and large, I do stand by my predictions. Yeah.
Which team do you find hardest to look at from a betting perspective? Do you tend to have your favourites that you stick to? Maybe a handful of teams that you're always got a good read on, or are there teams that come and go? Which ones are the tough ones?
I'd say Kristiansund are one of the hardest sides because they're a funny. I said it in my preview at the weekend against Stabæk. They're not very good when they're favourites. If they're odds on to win a game, they often don't win it. But if they're sort of a nice little underdog at the right sort of price, then they'll rock up and win. You could say that's kind of predictable in a way, but I don't like that about sides. I like if a side's a favourite, odds-on favourite to win the game, I want to see them winning the match. I like to see that sort of reliability. I'm not just after predictions in terms of who's going to win the game. I'm a big goals man, over 2.5, over 2.75 goals. So I do like to be betting on sides that are good defensively and crap at the back. I don't like sides who create loads of chances and miss them all the time, like Sarpsborg are really annoying this year for that. There's teams like Lillestrøm who seem to be able to play all right against some of the big teams, but they're absolutely crap against sides around them. So there's always warning. There's always a lot of warning alert signs on. Every league has them every year. All I just want is teams that are a bit consistent in whatever capacity they do, whether they're good at home, crap away, scoring goals or not scoring goals. The worst sort of sides that just go up and down, like a horse draws, mate. And Kristiansund are probably one of those at the moment. There's a couple of others that spring to mind as well, potentially. Ranheim are horrible to deal with for that.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm going to move on to another question now, and this is I've seen some loaded questions in my time, but this is like loaded magazine, to be honest. For anyone who remembers them in the 90s, Tom Dent, who we've had on the show, and he's an employee, I believe, of Bodø Glimt, and he's asked us, with Odd and Glimt performing way above expectations, where will they finish the season, and how important is the summer window now to hang on to what they have? And I think, it's worth focusing on Odd and Bodø for a little bit on this show, because, like you said, a Leicester situation, maybe potentially, both of them are absolutely flying. I think you said in pre-season, or the pre-season show, that we don't talk hardly at all about Odd. And I'm not going to let you get away with not talking about them now. They're second in the table with 2 games in hand. So let's hear your opinions on those 2 teams. And do you think, as Tom asks?
Well, naturally, let's start with Bodø Glimt, yeah? Because I want to delay talking about Odd for as long as I can.
No, that's not happening. on this show.
Bodø Glimt, I may add that I was one of the very few pundits in this league that actually predicted them to do all right. Most, men and his dog were predicting them to be relegation fodder this year. I could, and there's been a few apologies around, I think, for that at the moment. It's obviously still a long way to go. Bodø Glimt have been excellent. One thing I must say is Odd and Bodø Glimt, they're not just there by fluke, John. They fully deserve where they are in the table right now. They've anyone who a neutral out there who wants to watch some Norwegian football, you could do worse than watching Bodø Glimt. They play a lovely style of football. They've got some nice technical players, great on the ball. You've got to wonder how long that can continue for, because defensively there's a few signs that you can get at them defensively, for sure. So they've got to keep scoring goals. I do worry a little bit about, the striker up front, Heron, has done really well so far. But you wouldn't have him in sort of elite class or really top class striker. He just feels like he's playing above his level at the moment. Again, how long can he keep that up for? I do like what I've seen from him. I wish him the very best, but maybe they could do with another striker. I don't know. And of course, you need to keep hold of your players for Bodø Glimt. There'll be quite a few sniffing at their promising, talented players.
I wanted to ask you about that actually, because if you look at the Eliteserien of goal scoring charts, there's 2 players I wanted to pick your brains on these teams. One of them is Torgeir Borven, I believe.
Yeah,
17-year-old who's got 8 goals in the league, second top scorer behind Owe. And Amor Launi of Bodø Glimt, who has 6 goals, a 26-year-old. Tell us about these 2 players just briefly. And, Tom asks if they're going to be able to keep on to what they have. Are those 2 players maybe ones who might be in the shop window this summer?
Actually, I don't think those 2 are going to be in the shop window, because Launi, he's not what you call highly sought after at this point in time at all. I think it's more like the youngsters like Hakon, Evjen or Patrick Berg, who might be at more risk of moving on. Of course, no one's ever safe in this league. If an offer comes in from anywhere decent, and it's hard for clubs to refuse, and it's very hard for the players to refuse, so no one's safe. But yeah, Uni's done really well. I always rated him. I think I said on the first show, get him in your fantasy team, and he's one of the high-scoring players. Great winger, cuts in from the inside and scores a lot of goals, creates a lot of chances on set pieces, good technically. Nice player, I rate him a lot. Torgeir Borven, on the other hand, is someone who's actually defied me, John. There's been times, certainly last year, at the start of this year, that I've said publicly, I don't rate him much. I didn't see anything there that suggested he would be scoring so many goals this year, but he's inexplicably raised the level of his game in 2019. I can't explain why, because he was someone who was in a real slump period for the last 2 or 3 years, but something happened in the winter, and he's looked really sharp. He's just looked better technically, mentally, confidence is up, and he's scoring goals in all sorts of ways. Fox in the box, heading goals. Even from outside the area, he's looked a threat. So, look, fair play to him, and he doesn't look like he's going to stop scoring. But I don't see who's going to come in, for an offer from him, certainly from abroad at this point in time. It'd be more likely to come at the end of the season, really, there. But, fair play to Bourbon so far. He's totally proved me wrong.
Great stuff. Thanks for that, Steve. I mean, let's just talk about Odd then. Can you see them sustaining it, and who have been their key men?
Yeah, I mean, if there's one side that can sustain it, it will be them, because they've got a very experienced manager, Fadugba, who, a few years ago, this was a side that was regularly in the top 3 or 4 and were always touted as dark horses for the title. It would be ironic this is the year when no one really did say that about them, that they would actually challenge. They're a very consistent side. If you look at the Odd team, that 11 will not change much throughout the whole. I mean, they played 11 games. There won't be many changes of note there. Similar to Leicester City back when they won the league, they hardly changed their side, did they? But it's a 4-3-3 formation. They've got a couple of really strong central defenders in Hagen and Semberger. Again, the defence is rock solid. You've got midfielders who are hard to break down. And then, obviously, Bourbon up front's done well. And on either side of him, Rashani, who's a very popular fantasy pick, technically good player. And Sander Svensson, who hasn't got great stats in goals and assists, but he seems to make a real impact in the games. I think there's something, maybe a big second half of the season to come from Svensson in terms of statistics. One thing, the midfield, they did lose Fredrik Nordkveld to injury, and they missed him a bit, but he came back at the weekend and scored 2 good goals. Can they sustain it? Yeah, they're the most likely team to sustain it.
Good one.
But it's Odd against Bodø Glimt this weekend, actually, John, in Bodø. So, the result of that is obviously a big game for both.
Yeah, and just a quick stat on Odd that listeners may be interested in. They've won the Norwegian Cup 12 times in their history, but they have never won the title. So it would really be a Leicester City situation in that sense for Odd. We're going to take a break now. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about Europe and maybe a few other questions. So see you after this short break. Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. My name is Jonathan Fadugba, and I'm joined by Steve Wyss, my colleague, friend and associate. We're going to talk a little bit more about Norway because there's been a managerial departure or two recently, hasn't there, Steve? And one of them is fairly high profile.
Yeah, well, this happened at Stabæk a few weeks ago. Henrik Larsson has gone to one of the teams in Cyprus. I think it's Ammonia Nicosia. It's one of the Nicosia sides anyway. Now, he obviously wasn't sacked or anything, but they've been doing so poorly. It may well be a good thing for Stabæk. And they brought back a guy called Jan Jönsson, a Swede, who actually won the league with Stabæk in, he was 2008 or 2009. So he's a bit of a legend here, a very experienced campaigner. He's managed Rosenborg before. He's managed in Sweden, I think Halmstad. Most recently was managing in Japan, of all places. But a very experienced manager has come back to the fold, likes to play a 4-4-2 system, an attacking style, which will suit Stabæk. And, they lost his first game in charge at home to Tromsø, although they missed a penalty in that, so could have easily got a result. And then nicked a 1-0 at Kristiansand the weekend, and they're still, I think, in the Norwegian Cup. I'm not entirely sure about that one, but Stabæk, not a bad start for the new manager Jan Jönsson at Stabæk. But
was it a case of Henrik Larsson being asked to leave, or was it, I look at the table, they're second bottom. So in the relegation zone, they're struggling a little bit, aren't they? Although they've got some games in hand. But what was the situation behind his departure, or is he, moving to bigger things in terms of maybe a slightly bigger league in terms of money and that kind of thing?
Well, he would say that, wouldn't he? Naturally, but
I want the honest. I want the truth from Meat Man Soccer here.
I don't know the ins and outs of that club, but honestly, on the outside, me looking in, it may well be a case of he jumped before he was pushed, because they hadn't been doing very well. Resources aren't great there, but he kept them up last year. But I wasn't particularly impressed with Stabæk, and I actually think it's done them a big favour in moving on, and they've probably replaced him with someone who's better suited at the club right now. So it's going to be a battle against relegation for Stabæk this year, and he can move to Cyprus for his. I mean, it's a strange place to go, isn't it? The Cypriot League.
Well, I thought you might be joining Linus and Elias there when you first mentioned it. But
why would you want to go to Cyprus? Is there much money in that league? I have no idea, but the weather's better, I suppose. But
you're not going to be struggling in sort of minus 10 temperatures, are you? You're not going to find too much snow in Nicosia, are you really? But strange one there. Henrik Larsson, obviously former Manchester United player, and a very high-profile name in Norway and international. Let's move on, and I wanted to touch on, the Norwegian Cup is one thing that you mentioned just there. Been a few shocks, haven't there?
Unbelievable. I actually watched the Norwegian Cup match the other night, which is, me, anyone who knows me well, I don't watch cups very often.
I was going to say, that's a bit of a surprise.
Well, I actually watched Allsvenskan against Rosenborg in the cup, because it's kind of bit of box office at the moment. Rosenborg still, and I mean, Allsvenskan, what incredible last two rounds they've had. They beat Molde 4-0 at home in the previous round, 4-0 against the current league leaders of the Eliteserien, and then they've gone to Rosenborg last night and beat them on penalties, so they're into the quarterfinals. But there's been so many shocks. Sarpsborg went down to Tromsdalen a couple of rounds ago. They're bottom of the Obos-ligaen. Vålerenga and Strømsgodset got beaten by third division opposition, which is incredible. And the last couple of nights ago, Ranheim beat Brann 4-0 at home. Brann fielded a completely strong starting 11. It's been... Strummen nearly... they took... I think they're a second division side as well. They took Haugesund to extra time. We had Stabæk 2, Viking 5. So we've got a quarter-final lineup of Ålesund against Viking. Ålesund are absolutely flying in the Obos-ligaen. Look like they're going to be running away with the league, I think, this year under Lars Bohinen there. So they're in the quarterfinals. They could win the cup. Second division side. Then we've got Mjøndalen against Haugesund, which is an all-Eliteserien tie. And then Ranheim against a team called Fram. I've not a clue who Fram are, I've got to be honest. Not a clue. I don't even know what league they're in. Apologies. And then KFUM Oslo, who are in the Obos-ligaen, and they're against Odd. I would have Odd as the favourites to win this competition now, actually. You mentioned they won the Norwegian Cup 12 times, may well be 13 times, but it's wide open competition. All the big boys are pretty much out of this cup now, John, and it's been pretty staggering.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and Odd haven't won it since 2000 the last time, so 19-year wait maybe about to end. Very interesting that, some of the teams in there are really quite off the beaten track, aren't they? Perhaps we'll have to look into some of these teams, maybe bring on some of the managers or something in future episodes. Let's move on now, because it's the summertime, the weather's fine. We've got 20-degree temperatures around Europe, heat waves, that kind of thing. Ice creams are out. Sandy beaches, Steve. Sunglasses. I think you know where I'm going with this, because it's that time of the year where European football swings into gear. And obviously that's a major occasion in the calendar for Swedish and Nordic teams, Norwegian teams, and Nordic teams in general, of course. This is the time of the year where maybe teams can often maybe get a little bit distracted. Some of the big boys maybe take their eye off things, maybe with one eye on Europe, and the pot of gold that awaits if they can get to the Europa League or Champions League group stages. But it's the preliminary rounds at present, and you're going to give us a bit of a rundown, aren't you, Steve, on some of the plum ties we should be looking out for over the next sort of 2-3 weeks?
Well, I'm going to go with. I'm going to start actually with Europa League. You're going to go through the Champions League, but this Europa League first round, I love the Europa League qualifying rounds. Better than the group stages, actually, because there's some really good ties towards the end of it that really matter to a lot of sides. Unlike some of the sides in the Europa League don't like being in there, do they? Especially from teams from like the UK and that, or England. We've got the first qualifying round is the first leg's the 9th, 10th, and 11th of July, and then the second leg's a week after. Teams involving Norwegian and Swedish. Got Malmo are going to be facing potentially Ballymena United from Northern Ireland. We had them. We talked about them a couple of years ago when they faced Odd in the Europa League. That'd be a great tie for them. Malmo should come through that easily, shouldn't they? Brann have got Shamrock Rovers, an Irish side. We've got Norrköping are also facing Irish opposition. St Patrick's Athletic, which is let's see how they go there. Häcken have already made it through to the second qualifying round, where they've got a bit of a monstrous tie. They're facing AZ Alkmaar, 25th of July and 1st of August. They'd do very well to get past them, wouldn't they? But the sheer fact that they're actually entering at that stage of the competition is obviously a positive for Häcken. And I feel like I've missed one off. Molde. They've got a team called KR from Iceland at home. So, it looks to me like, certainly in the first qualifying round, all of the sides that I mentioned there from Norway and Sweden have got very winnable ties. And I really feel it's important that both nations, in terms of the coefficient, they've got to be looking to try and get sides through to the group stage again, John, in my opinion. We had that last year with Malmö, Sarpsborg, Rosenborg. Let's see if we can do the same again,
Yeah, and just looking at St Pat's, who are an Irish team, I think based in Dublin, their tickets for the game against Norrköping are just €15, which is, pretty tempting, I must say, for such a massive game. And Norrköping are, I think they're one of the teams that you look at and you think it would be a huge boost for their club to get, deep into the qualifying rounds or even into the group stages, although that's, very difficult task. But, you look at Malmo are the ones who always sort of, tend to make the money in this competition, and focus on it quite heavily. But, it would be interesting if a team like Häcken or, Norrköping got into the Europa League group stages, wouldn't it, Steve?
Incredibly, the highest seeded team that will enter the qualifying for Europa League is AS Roma with a ridiculously high coefficient. So imagine if one of the teams from Norway or Sweden drew them. That would be kind of very unlucky, wouldn't it? Well,
maybe we'll get their Twitter account to give us a sort of a retweet, because they're very active on Twitter, aren't they?
So someone's going to get Roma in the I think third qualifying round. Yeah. So let's hope that someone gets that far. But some very winnable ties for sure. And as I say, it'd be interesting to follow the progress of these teams in Europe. What about the Champions League? What have AIK and Rosenborg got against, John?
Yeah, good segue there into this section of the Champions League, because ties which will be played on the 9th and 10th of July and 16th and 17th of July, so not too far away now. We've got Ararat Armenia against Swedish champions AIK. So that's an interesting test there in Armenia. And Rosenborg, the champions, will play another sort of, a Northern Irish team, Linfield, who are based in Belfast. So, yeah, we've got a lot of, the Irish or Northern Irish connection is really going to be a big one. So, yeah, that's something positive and nice to see. We might be able to sort of talk to a few of their fans, maybe. I'm glad just to see that Rosenborg have avoided Celtic for once. Makes a bit of a change, doesn't it? But yeah, there's not too many knowns, but there are a few relatively big teams in that group, like Celtic. Other teams with big names like Ferencváros, Red Star Belgrade. But yeah, those are the two ties. I think AIK will potentially fancy their chances. Be a tough game. I can't say I know anything about Armenia. I'm not going to lie to to listeners, I have to educate myself. I think in the next 2 weeks on them. Linfield, of course, semi-pro team, so you'd think Rosenborg might fancy their chances, wouldn't you, Steve?
Yeah, it's not been a great year for Rosenborg, but you've got to think that they will fancy the chances there. I always say, if you want to make the group stage of the Europa League, I mean, let's be honest, if Rosenborg or AIK make the group stage of the Champions League, it'd be an absolute miracle, wouldn't it? It's so hard to qualify for that. And I think there's only like 5 spots available, or 6. It's something really low number. But it's still realistic. You could potentially make the group stage of the Europa League. But I always think to actually get there, you've got to beat at least one really big team along the way. Like Rosenborg did it against Ajax, didn't they, a couple of years ago? When Östersunds qualified, I think they beat Galatasaray. So if you want to get there, you have got to beat a big boy, because it's very rarely the draw opens up so easily that someone does the dirty work for you. And it's just a question, can we see out the sides like, AIK, Rosenborg, they're probably going to end up in Europa League qualifying, aren't they? Can we see any of our sides sort of being able to cause big shocks against sides that have only just come out of pre-season training, so there are advantages, for having the summer league. So let's hope we can get some tasty matchups and some shots.
Indeed, and we'll be covering those. We may even get some special guests, as we've done in the past, maybe to come and join us. So,
definitely, yeah.
So get ready for some Northern Irish and Irish accents, maybe in the coming weeks.
Top of the morning to you.
Yeah. I mean, we think we'll leave it there pretty much. Just a couple of listener questions, maybe, before we go. Shall I fire one at you, Steve? Or?
Yeah. Fire away.
I mean, we had a question from Abdullah, which we've touched on, Abdullah FCK, which I enjoyed, which was how simple will develop with Henrik Larsson. I think we've touched on that. It will be a big challenge for him, in my opinion. I think there is some potential with that club, some decent talents there, but he's going to have to. He's going to be, if you look at an equivalent of maybe Frank Lampard at Chelsea, potentially going back to Chelsea, he's an absolute legend there, and they could lose their first 3 games in a row, and I don't think anyone would care. This is a bit of a flip side, really. Larsson has to win over the doubters, to be honest, and I think there are quite a few doubters at Helsingborg, really. So he's in a bit of a tough situation there. But if he can overcome that early stages, get some wins, maybe all will be forgiven. But yeah, I mean, let's pick up on a question from Anne Speller, who asks, what happens to Rosenborg now in the Eliteserien? I mean, they're up to 9th in the table. We talked about them at one point. They were near the relegation zone. They've climbed away from that now. They're about 8 points off the leaders. No, sorry, 10 points, I think. 13 points. So what are their hopes there, Steve?
Well, they actually won 3 games in a row not too long ago in the league. They weren't convincing wins, although actually one was. They beat Vålerenga 3-0, but I think half the issue there was how poor Vålerenga have been. I'm not going to rant about Vålerenga in this podcast because I do it in every other one. But basically, what I'm saying is not sure what they actually beat in that game 3-0. Well, I do know what they beat. They beat a side that's very spineless and has no heart. But 3 wins in a row looked like they'd steadied the ship. But these Norwegian Cup games have really messed up Rosenborg because they had to go to extra time against Nest Sotra 2 rounds ago. They nearly got beat there, and then obviously got beat on penalties by Allsvenskan. So they can't even beat 2 Obos-ligaen sides in the cup. The manager hasn't been rotating the team much at all. We've all heard that he trains the players really hard. Pre-season was rough, and now he's not even rotating the squad around. He didn't even change the goalkeeper for the cup, which is staggering. But I think the fitness is noticeable. There's not much energy left in their tank, and this is going to be the same problem when they enter the European qualifiers. So I mean, you've got to presume they're going to beat Linfield surely, and they'll get through to the next round after that, and that's going to affect their league form. Look, the manager is not a bad manager, but he does not fit this club at all. His philosophy, his ways. It's a bit like Premier League terms, Sean Dyche moving to somewhere like, well, Liverpool or Man City or Man United, you know, a really big club. It just probably wouldn't suit their style, would it? The way he plays.
Yeah, I mean, we have sort of talked about him in the past as well, haven't we? I think we'll move on quickly because I wanted to ask you another question we've had from Steve your namesake there, Stephen at SteveAVFC. And he asked a question which I think we'll round it off on because it's a big game, isn't it, really? Bodø Glimt against Odd on Sunday. He says, how important is this game? Who do you think will win? And do you think the loser will fall off in the title race?
No, I don't think the loser will fall off. I think both sides have had defeats recently and they've bounced back from them well. So if there is a loser here, I think they can come back. How important is it? Yeah. I think if Odd win this game, then they're right in the title race for me. Right in it. There'd be, I mean, we'll see what Molde do against Brann. I think Molde will beat Brann actually at the weekend. But just say Molde win that, there'd be 3 points behind with 2 games in hand. So they'd be right up there, wouldn't they? Bodø Glimt. Well, it's a tough game to predict, actually. I don't know who's going to win this one. It's a clash of styles, that's for sure. A really attack-minded side against sort of an Odd team, I think, would be hard to break down and defensive. Cool, I couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, while you stew on that for a second, just a couple of stats on these two teams. I mean, they both got goal difference of +9, but there couldn't be bigger contrasts in terms of their general approach, could there? Odd have 18 goals from their 11 games. Bodø Glimt's 25 goals. But meanwhile, Odd have conceded 9 goals in their 11 games, whereas Bodø Glimt have conceded 16. And, they've conceded more than Sarpsborg and more than Stabæk down the bottom. So, Bodø Glimt are definitely a all-action kind of entertaining, goals, lots of goals going in at both ends type team. I've given you there at least a good 25, 30 seconds there, Steve, to stew over that one.
Yeah, I'm going with Odd. I mean, just remind me, I mean, Bodø Glimt faced Brann a few weeks ago, about a month ago now, at home, and they lost it 2-1. And they were bullied by Brann's physicality in that game. And the same could happen here. Odd are a much more, I say, physical side, tactical side in that way, experienced, and they can probably find a way to win ugly, Odd in this game. I would personally like to see Bodø Glimt win. I've liked what I see from them this year, and it'd be really cool to see them staying up there. But I think it's not a good matchup for them. But maybe they've got what Bodø Glimt have. They do have players that can make something happen out of nothing, like Layuni or Hakon Evjen. So let's see. I think I'd say 2-1 Odd is my prediction.
That's fine. I thought you were going to sit on the fence there, but you've got 2-1 Odd. Okay, interesting. And we'll end it on a couple of stats, although it's not necessarily relevant. But Odd have won their last 6 home matches. So, away from home, how will they get on at Bodø? And Bodø have scored the opening goal in 73% of their games this season. So a couple of interesting stats for you there. We're going to round it up now. Tune in. We'll be analysing that game in upcoming shows. And we'll have plenty more interviews as well. We've got some really interesting guests lined up for the next summer months, which we'll be bringing you. So thanks to Sean Constable for appearing on the last show. And there's going to be plenty more to come. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at Nordic Foot Pod, or give us a like on Facebook, Nordic Football Podcast. You can also follow us on our individual pages, Meatman Soccer and JF Football. But yeah, you can look at that on the Nordic Foot Pod Twitter account or YouTube. We're going to wrap it up there, and Steve as well will be coming up with some fantasy football YouTube streams, which he's been doing, which have been very well received, haven't they, Steve? So yeah, we're going to say goodbye now. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll be back soon. Thanks and goodbye.
Yeah, I'm due to do one of the fantasy videos. It probably won't be before this round, but before the next round, I think. So yeah, thanks for listening. We'll see you all very soon. Take care. Goodbye.